under their care. And there are many different aspects of it, which I'm happy to share with you individually if you have any interest in knowing about it. It's a model that we hope will be replicated around the country. And the idea of bringing civic leaders, people who will actually learn more about the city and its process, to the nonprofits to use the help that they have learned in their business career, bring them all together, in my mind, is really innovative in its best sense, because everybody's learning from each other and bringing their best game to the table.
Thank you, Cheryl. Now, before I kick off a discussion with our panelists, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's very curious to know what are the last 2 points that Sasha was going to tell us.
Oh, could you not
He
hear
said
anything
3.
at all?
I'm sorry?
Couldn't hear anything at all?
No, you
oh,
said
the last
you had
2
5,
points.
and you
I had 5.
only did 3.
Maybe it was a head fake. The last 2. The last 2 were around aligned incentives and bringing resources to bear. So aligned incentives simply, again, anybody who's a venture investor knows, and their experience is that the business plan that's on the page is your only guarantee is that that's not the business that's going to play out. So again, when you're a program officer and you say, well, here's the grant, here's the 1 year, here's the 2 year, here's what I expect to be reported out on, again, the question to ask is really, it's not to say that things shouldn't be measured, but how much innovation is going to be possible and at what rate? And can we broadly agree on a set of objectives that we want to reach, but not really the steps that we're going to use to get there? And the last 2 was really bringing resources to bear, and so much the venture industry or the private equity industry both. But it strikes me as curious that, so when we act as an investor in LifeSpring, for example, and they need a new IT system and they don't quite know how to get it, we'll roll up our sleeves and help them do that to the extent to which we have the skills to do that. And I don't see as much of the funder network thinking broadly about the capacities that they have to bring to bear, because it is not just capital that is really needed. So it's along the lines of what you were just talking about.
I was going to say that that's absolutely true, and it was a really important point of what you were saying. In Business Week this week, there's an article about how Google and Procter & Gamble are sharing employees and IT. Well, the nonprofits, and it talks about how corporations are thinking of creating federations to actually share information and become more productive. The Jewish philanthropic world, as far as I can tell, has a federation that should be working and doing that sort of thing. There's sort of a bundling of resources that has to happen, maybe even some back office mergers. It sounds like you're encouraging that in a way in India already.
Yeah. I can say just briefly that Nina Bruder is here from Bikurim. Also, Sean's going to be here, if he's not here already, from Jumpstart, and there are a bunch of other, Felicia from the town, a lot of people who work in this field in the Jewish sector. And what we're trying to do lately is to develop some kind of a partnership to share information when it comes down to it. And I think that a lot of this conversation has been about kind of general innovation. I want to kind of bring it back to the Jewish people, because that's what gets me going. That's why I do what I do. I think that one of the things that the Jewish people has that is a wonderful asset and might be bringing some of us to this room, if not all of us, within that asset is also a great base of power that can be leveraged for the sake of the Jewish people, but more importantly for the sake of the world. In my opinion, I come from a left-wing socialist, from a Shomer HaTziyah, a Zionist movement. I'm third generation. My grandparents built kibbutzim in Israel. My parents lived on those kibbutzim. I was born in New York City. For me, Jewish identity wasn't a religious calling. Apologies, Rabbi. But for me, Jewish identity was always a call to action. It was understanding that I can be more than just who I am as a human being by taking from this wisdom of thousands of years, by understanding the collective has a power and potential to become something more. And when we understand innovation within that context of understanding that we as Jews are not just another community, or at least should not seek to become just another community, regardless of what anyone else thinks, for ourselves, we need to believe that we choose the path that we walk, and that we thereby choose to walk it as best we can. I think that in that regards, the more partnerships, the more opportunities to learn from one another, to develop communities of learning, and to invest in those people who understand that the times are changing and therefore we must change to fit them. I think that that's our core need at this moment as people.
I have a number of questions before I'll open it up for everyone else to ask their questions. First is, I believe we have a panel of 4 individuals who really know themselves well, and they know where they play well, where they're going to have impact. And I believe that it's actually critical for all of us as funders to know thyself. What attributes or competencies may a funder have to make them well suited to funding innovation? So what are the competencies or attributes would you suggest either that you yourself possess or what you would like to see in general in funders as they say, yes, I can do this kind of work?
I think it's really important to have funders who share a common sense of the problem and a belief that you are probably the right person that they should have confidence in and let you do what you do. And it's funny that you mentioned Echoing Green, because when I started, Echoing Green is a social venture philanthropy, is that the way to say it? And for me it was, here's $25,000 each year for 2 years, go do what you want to do. And I was like, I don't have to like tell you like what my strategy is and have you approve it. And they were like, I mean, yeah, I suppose, but whatever. And that was really great, because in the beginning you just have to figure it out. And I think that what you want is that shared value. And if I can just say something Jenny and I were just talking about and sort of segue, Jenny from Nathan Cummings Foundation, who's a staff person. I don't know if I can say more, but whatever. What was very interesting to me about the Nathan Cummings Foundation that I think is a parallel to being a social entrepreneur is that the family believing in something sort of takes a lot of responsibility away from, let's say, a program officer fearing failure. Because when the family can believe in something, it can be braver. And I think in the last year, it struck me a lot. We've talking about like the Washington Post and the Pentagon Papers, and that seems to me to be huge. So it is that idea of the removing that kind of covering yourself mentality, allowing failure, and having funders back that and be there.
I would even say learning from failures, because it's much harder to learn from success in a lot of ways, because you never know exactly what it is about the success that made it successful. It could just be serendipity or luck or timing. Learning from failures is obviously has a broader range, and sharing that information with the other grantees. I think funders need to be that catalytic actor for innovation, and one way is by sharing failures, one way is by sharing information, one way is by creating consortium to share information and expertise. But another way is also to really have a positive attitude and a little bit of fun. And I know that's not often part of venture capital, but I think it's very important to include fun in funding.
Can I just say this about that? I mean, sorry. One thing that often drives me crazy, though, about the philanthropic world is I often feel like, as somebody who wants to achieve things, you know, I want to like get the thing out the door by the deadline. You know, I really don't have patience for the dilly-dallying of it all. And I often feel like in philanthropy, it's like, let's talk about failure. Let's get around it because it feels really safe. And it drives me crazy because I feel like you do want to learn from failure, but let's like learn from it and move on. But I often feel like, let's learn. And, you know, as you were saying, there's a kind of imperative here and a moment. And I think there should be a drive to succeed, and we should have a little bit of impatience. So fun and confidence and a little bit of impatience.
I mean, to answer the question about I can tell you about present tense, and from this I draw my conclusions about other investors and funders. Present tense has figured out, at least over the past 3 years in working in what we do well. And we also know thereby what we do not do well. We do not take ventures and make them into organizations. We do not take organizations and help them do capacity building. We do not help fund furtherance and growth. We take an idea and translate into action. We learned that, first of all, on our bones. We started a magazine 3 years ago. About 20 volunteers and I, all at Columbia University. And when the funding community said, nobody really is going to want the magazine, I put $5,000 on my credit card, a friend gave me $5,000, and we printed the magazine, sold ads. After we were able to grow it in terms of its readership, my partner and I, Aaron Horowitz, had a startup in Israel, and we said, well, you know, we have all these ideas, how do we translate them into action? well, let's rent an apartment and invite a bunch of folks who also have ideas and want to translate into action, and we'll teach them what they do. I have a master's in nonprofit management, and he has a background doing that kind of the for-profit side, so we started working with him. We launched 12 Ventures.